Hi everyone, welcome to this week's Happy Hour story, The Cat That Plays Fate. Yes, you heard that right. Meet Cashmere, a Norwegian forest cat of truly unreasonable magnificence who could have made his entrance quietly, could have waited, could have been subtle about the whole thing. He chose not to. He never does. Cashmere calls himself a cognitive archivist. He reads memories out of living minds, he has opinions about everything, and he has been placed, with great deliberateness, by forces he will explain on his own schedule, into the life of a woman named Madeline Roux. Madeline is a journalist. She is stubborn in the specific way that makes brilliant people dangerous, and she has been blacking out without explanation, telling nobody, and filing it under problems to deal with later. Later is about to arrive. When we meet her, she's breaking into a house in the Bronx at midnight, in the rain, through a window that was not designed for someone of her wingspan. A source has gone cold and she can't walk away, because that's who she is. And what she finds inside that house changes everything, though she won't understand how much for a while yet. This story is funny, it's full of heart. You don't have to love cats to love it, though by the end, don't be surprised if you do. And when it's over, you'll understand exactly why Cashmere chose Madeline and why he needed her to choose him back first. A quick note before we begin. This channel isn't monetized on YouTube. We don't get paid for your views, not a single cent. We're here because the world is loud and relentless, and sometimes you just need an hour where someone tells you a good story and everything for a little while is okay. That's what this place is, a harbor. Come as often as you need. What you're about to hear is complete, a whole story, with a beginning, a middle, and an ending that will stay with you. But if you want to stay longer, Madeline's world connects to a whole universe of characters at happynovels.com. The silver tier is free. Come find us there and make it your harbor too. And if this story makes your day even slightly better, hit like. Someone else out there needs it too. The Cat That Plays Fate is written by D.N. Leo and narrated by Jessica Lee. Now, let's begin.
Chapter 1. The house sat at the end of Mott Haven's least ambitious street, wedged between a shuttered bodega and a chain-link fence that had given up on standing straight sometime around the last season of Friends. Rain slicked the pavement in sheets. A streetlight buzzed overhead, flickering like it was trying to communicate in Morse code and running out of things to say. Madeline Roux killed the engine of her 12-year-old excuse of a car and sat in the dark. She pressed 2 fingers to the bruise blooming across her left hip. The edge of her desk had caught her on the way down, a sharp crack of bone against particle board that she'd felt even before she hit the floor. Second time this month. The first had been in the bathroom at the Trumpet, which at least had the decency to be private. Tonight's blackout had happened mid-sentence, standing at the printer, and the only reason nobody saw was because the newsroom at 11 p.m. was emptier than a politician's promise. She rolled her neck, tested her vision. Fine, everything fine. The doctors had run bloods, scans, the full carnival of modern medicine, and come back with the medical equivalent of a shrug. You're as healthy as a 21-year-old, Ms. Roux. Fantastic. 21-year-olds didn't collapse face first into office furniture without warning. Better not let Joe find out. Joe had installed a health monitoring app on Madeline's phone without asking, and the last blackout had triggered a 37-text interrogation that started with, "Are you dead?" and ended with, "If you're not dead, I'm going to kill you." The rain hammered the windshield. Madeline checked the address on her phone against the numbers spray-painted on the front door. 4811, Match Michael Webb, freelance accountant. The kind of accountant who kept 2 sets of books and 1 set of very nervous clients. He'd called the Trumpet's tip line 3 days ago, voice shaking, saying he had documents that would, quote, blow the roof off the Hargrove development deal. Madeline had spent 48 hours verifying enough to justify the drive. Now Michael Webb wasn't answering his phone. She tried again, 4 rings, voicemail. A robotic female voice informed her that the mailbox was full. Madeline thumbed her favorites list and hit the second name. Josephine Cassidy's House of Digital Miracles, Joe answered on the first ring. State your emergency or hang up. I'm in the middle of annihilating a 12-year-old in ranked Valorant, and he's been trash-talking for 40 minutes. This is personal now. I'm at the address, Madeline said. Nobody's home or nobody's answering. Define nobody. Dark windows, no car in the driveway. I rang the bell twice. Keyboard clatter erupted through the speaker. Rapid, aggressive, the sound of someone who typed like they were settling a personal score with the alphabet. Location's pinging correct, Joe said. You're standing exactly where my text says you should be standing. The possibility that I got it wrong is, hold on, let me calculate. 0. 0%. Rounded down from 0. Generous of you to double-check. I didn't double-check. I'm confirming what I already knew. There's a difference. More typing. A faint explosion from the game in the background. Hold on, get wrecked, Tyler. Sorry. Madeline. Do not break into that house. I wasn't going to break into the house. You were literally forming the thought. I could hear it. Your breathing changed. You get this little nasal thing when you're about to do something felonious. I do not have a nasal thing. You have a nasal thing. It's like a tiny criminal wheeze. Very distinctive. I could pick it out of a police lineup of wheezes. Bring my burner phone back in one piece, please. I just loaded a new firmware on it, and I don't want to explain to my supplier why it was found at a crime scene. It's not going to be a crime scene. It's always a crime scene with you. Last month you climbed a building for a hamster, Joe said. 12 stories. The fire department sent a helicopter. A helicopter, Madeline. The pilot was interviewed on Channel 4. He said, and I quote, "In 20 years of rescue operations, I have never seen a woman in wedge heels scaling a building for a rodent." He called it both inspiring and deeply concerning. It has 40,000 views. Mr. Whiskers is a very important hamster, and you begged me for 2 weeks to keep him, because I thought you were fostering, not adopting. Mr. Whiskers is a rodent who now lives in your apartment eating high-end organic kale and judging you from his penthouse cage like a tiny furry landlord. He bit my thumb last Tuesday, drew blood. I looked into his eyes afterwards and I swear he smiled. That hamster is plotting something. He was startled. He made eye contact first. That was premeditated. Joe's keyboard paused. Madeline, I say this with love. You are 5'11". You are an adult woman with a journalism degree and a lease. Please stop climbing buildings for animals. Good night, Joe. Do not... Madeline hung up. The window on the east side of the house was open. Not much. 3 inches, maybe 4. Enough for the rain to beat along the sill and drip onto what looked like linoleum. A bathroom window, small even by bathroom window standards. Madeline Roux was 5'11". She had the wingspan of a moderately ambitious eagle. She looked at the window the way a Great Dane looks at a cat flap, with optimism that bordered on delusion. She pulled herself up, got her shoulders through, got her rib cage through, and then her hips made a compelling argument against the entire enterprise. For a full 8 seconds she hung there, half in and half out, rain hammering her legs, her jacket riding up to her ears, one boot kicking uselessly against the exterior wall. "This is fine," she said to nobody. "This is completely fine." She exhaled every molecule of air in her lungs, turned sideways in a move that her chiropractor would later describe as ambitious, and scraped through the frame. Her belt buckle caught on the latch, her left boot clipped the faucet. She landed on the bathroom tile in a controlled collapse that was not technically a fall, because falls were unintentional and she had intended to end up on the floor at some point, just not face first, and not with the shower curtain wrapped around her head. She lay there for a moment, breathing through polyester, and took stock. Nothing broken, pride damaged, shower curtain moderately traumatized. The smell hit her as she untangled herself. Not rot, not death. Something chemical. Sharp, antiseptic, the kind of clean that was trying too hard to cover something else. Bleach, and underneath it, copper. Old copper, like pennies left in a jar of water for too long. Her boots squeaked on the tile. The bathroom was small, dark, and empty. No towels on the rack, no toothbrush by the sink. A house that had been cleared of personality. The hallway beyond was worse. Bare walls. No furniture in the front room except a folding table and a metal chair. The kitchen had a single mug in the sink, unwashed. The overhead light was dead, but street light bled through the blinds in pale orange stripes. She almost missed him. The cage sat in the back corner of the kitchen, behind the folding table, half covered by a gray moving blanket. Industrial-grade steel mesh. The kind of crate meant for large dogs, or for something someone wanted very badly to keep contained. Inside it, a cat. No, not a cat. A cathedral of a cat. Even in the bad light, even through the steel mesh, the animal was enormous. 15 pounds at minimum, maybe more, with a broad, powerful frame and the remnants of what must have been a staggering white coat. Thick double fur, a lion's ruff around the neck, tufted ears that belonged on a creature from a Norse saga. Must have been. Because right now the coat was a disaster. Patches of bare pink skin showed through the white like someone had taken handfuls of fur and simply ripped them away. Above the left ear, a bald spot the size of a silver dollar. Along the flank, 3 more overlapping. The ruff was thin, patchy, tragic. He looked like a cashmere sweater that had been through a divorce. But his eyes... Madeline had looked into the eyes of cornered animals before. Feral cats, injured dogs, the one raccoon that had somehow gotten into the Trumpets' basement and hissed at everyone for 2 hours before animal control arrived. Cornered animals had a specific look, fear compressed into fury, a survival instinct burning at the back of the pupil. This cat didn't have that look. This cat looked at her the way a diplomat looks at a customs agent who's just asked him to remove his shoes. Patient, imperial, deeply, personally offended by the entire situation, but willing to endure it because making a scene was beneath him. Sea-green eyes tracked her across the kitchen. Not blinking, not flinching, assessing. "Hey," Madeline said softly. She crouched by the cage. "Hey, big guy, what happened to you?" The lock on the cage was a heavy-duty padlock, hardened steel shackle. She pulled at it, solid. The cage itself was bolted at the corners. No zip ties, no weak points. Whoever had put this cat in here had not been interested in the cat getting out. She dug through her jacket pockets. Bobby pin, pen, breath mint. Nothing useful. She tried the bobby pin on the padlock anyway. The pin bent immediately into a shape that could only be described as modern art. "Okay." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling animal control. They'll have bolt cutters. They can..." "If you call the municipal animal response line," the cat said, "they will arrive in 4 to 6 hours, attempt to sedate me, fail because the standard dosage is calibrated for creatures approximately 1/9 of my neurological complexity, and then transfer me to a facility where I will be placed in a cage marginally less offensive than this one, but with significantly worse lighting. I would prefer you did not." Madeline dropped her phone. It hit the linoleum, bounced once, and slid under the folding table. She didn't pick it up. She was too busy staring at the cat with both hands frozen in the air at roughly the position they'd been in when her brain had decided to shut down all motor functions and dedicate its entire processing power to the question of whether she was still unconscious on her office floor. The rain tapped against the kitchen window. The streetlight buzzed. Somewhere down the block, a car alarm started and stopped. The cat watched her with those sea-green eyes, unblinking, waiting, as if he'd just commented on the weather and was politely allowing her time to respond. Madeline's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She looked like a fish that had just been told it was adopted. "You," she managed. That was you." "Complete sentences are customary," the cat said. His voice was low, unhurried, and carried the weary authority of someone who had been explaining obvious things to people for longer than he cared to recall. Every consonant was precise. Every vowel had been considered, approved, and released into the world only after meeting his personal standards. "Though I appreciate that the experience may be novel for you. You talked." A reductive observation, but accurate. The cat didn't blink. "I also breathe, metabolize protein, and have opinions about your breath mint, which I can smell from here, and which is an affront to peppermint as a botanical species. Shall we catalog the full list, or may we proceed to matters of actual urgency?" "You're a cat." "I am aware of my morphological presentation, thank you." "Cats don't talk." "And yet..." He inclined his head. A fraction of a degree, no more. "I am Cashmere, Cognitive Archivist, First Elite Class, and I require you to open this cage using a method that does not involve your municipal government, your animal control infrastructure, or that bobby pin, which you have already murdered beyond recognition." Madeline grabbed the bars of the cage with both hands and pressed her face close. "Okay, Cashmere, I need you to say something else." "Why?" "Because I'm trying to figure out if I'm having a stroke or if this is actually happening, and the only way to confirm is if you keep talking so I can rule out auditory hallucination." Cashmere stared at her for a long moment. One ear rotated a 1/4 inch toward the window, checked for threats, and rotated back. The rest of him didn't move. "You fell through that window like a giraffe being posted through a letterbox," he said. "I watched the entire performance. At one point, you were wearing the shower curtain as formal wear. If you are having a stroke, it predates this conversation by some margin." "You saw that?" "I have eyes. The cage has bars, not walls." He paused. The shower curtain was a choice. Madeline sat back on her heels. The dimple on her left cheek disappeared the way it always did when she was processing something that her brain had flagged as absolutely unacceptable, but her curiosity had already accepted. "Fine," she said. "Fine. You're a talking cat, named Cashmere, with a job title." "Correct. In a cage, in an empty house in Mott Haven." "Also correct. Your observational skills are adequate. Perhaps we could apply them to the padlock." Madeline leaned forward. "Here's what I think, Cashmere. I think you need me to open this cage, which means I'm the one with the leverage here. So before I touch that lock, you're going to tell me 3 things. What are you? How can you talk? And what happened to your fur?" Something shifted in those sea-green eyes. Not anger. Surprise. The micro-expression of a creature who was not accustomed to being outmaneuvered, and who was even less accustomed to it happening while he was in a cage, and the person doing it had shower curtain fibers in her hair. "The fur," he said quietly, "is not a subject I discuss." "Then we're going to sit here in the dark and bond. I brought a breath mint. We can share." Another tuft of white fur detached from his shoulder and drifted to the floor of the cage. Cashmere watched it fall with the expression of a man watching his retirement fund collapse in real time. His jaw tightened, or whatever the feline equivalent was, a tensing of the ruff, a flattening of dignity. "I read memories," he said. "It is my function, my purpose. I access cognitive impressions, thoughts, experiences, knowledge, from living minds and residual traces. The man who locked me in here wished to extract specific memories from a deceased associate. Every extraction has a cost." He looked at the tuft on the cage floor. "The cost is visible." "Your fur falls out when you read memories?" "An elegant summary of a complex bioenergetic process, but yes, every reading removes a portion of my coat. Small memories, a wisp, significant memories." He gestured with one paw at the bald patches along his flank. The movement was careful, contained, and absolutely furious. "I have been in this cage for 3 days. He required 11 readings. My coat has not been in this condition since the fall of Constantinople, and I was at least compensated for that." Madeline stared at the patches. Pink skin showing through white fur like a snow-covered field after a terrible picnic. Above his left ear, the bald spot caught the streetlight and gleamed. "That's horrible," she said. "It is significantly worse than horrible. It is an act of aesthetic vandalism. Do you have any idea how long this coat takes to grow back?" Cashmere drew himself up to his full height inside the cage, which was impressive, even accounting for the missing fur. "Centuries. I am not being dramatic. I am being calendrically precise. The patch above my left ear will not fully recover until approximately the year 2240, at which point I assume your species will have either evolved or destroyed itself, and either outcome is equally plausible from what I have observed." Centuries. Did I stutter? I did not stutter. Cats do not stutter. That is a physiological impossibility, and also beneath me. He fixed her with those sea-green eyes. "Now, you have your 3 answers. I am a cognitive archivist. I speak because I am not in fact a cat in the sense you understand the word, though the morphological presentation is accurate, and I will thank you not to dwell on it. And my fur is a war crime committed against me personally. Are we satisfied? May we proceed to the padlock? Because the man who locked me in here is returning in..." One ear swiveled toward the front of the house. "Less time than I would like." Madeline held up a finger. "One more thing. We do not have time for one more. The breath mint is wintergreen, not peppermint. If you're going to insult my snacks, at least get the genus right." Dead silence. Cashmere's whiskers twitched. Just once. The faintest, most involuntary micro-movement, so small that if Madeline hadn't been watching for it, she'd have missed it entirely. "The lock," he said, and his voice was approximately 1/4 of a degree less frosty than before, "is a Master 930 DLHPF, hardened steel, dual-ball locking mechanism. You will not pick it with what remains of your bobby pin. You will, however, find a 20-inch bolt cutter in the 3rd drawer of the workbench in the garage. The garage is accessed through the door to your left. The drawer sticks. Pull up and to the right simultaneously, not sequentially. Simultaneously. There is a difference, and the drawer will punish you for getting it wrong. Madeline went to the garage. The door stuck. The drawer stuck. She pulled up and to the right, simultaneously, not sequentially, and it scraped open to reveal a pair of heavy bolt cutters buried under a tangle of zip ties and duct tape. She grabbed them, tested the weight, solid, industrial, and carried them back to the kitchen. The cage was gone. Madeline stood in the empty kitchen with 20 inches of bolt cutter in her hands and nothing to cut. The moving blanket lay crumpled on the floor. Drag marks scored the linoleum, 2 long scratches leading from the corner to the back door, which stood open. Rain blew through it sideways. She ran. The alley behind the house was narrow, unlit, and smelled like wet concrete and motor oil. At the far end, a white cargo truck was pulling away from the curb. No plates visible, or if there were plates, the mud caking the bumper had handled that problem. The rear door was down but not fully latched. It bounced with every pothole, lifting an inch, dropping, lifting again. Through the gap, a flash of steel mesh, and behind the mesh, 2 sea-green eyes, luminous in the dark, locked onto hers. Madeline sprinted for her car. She fumbled the key into the ignition, reversed out of the driveway hard enough to clip the chain-link fence, and swung onto the street 2 car lengths behind the truck. 1 hand on the wheel, 1 hand on the phone. "This better be an apology," Joe said. "Tyler rage quit. He called me a word I'm not going to repeat, but it rhymed with witch, and I was 2 kills away from making him uninstall the game permanently. You owe me a psychological victory over a child. I need you to run a plate. It's midnight. Partial plate. New York commercial. White cargo truck, late model Ford Transit or similar, heading east on..." Madeline squinted through the rain. "East on 149, just past Brook Avenue. You broke into the house. The window was open. Madeline, you are 5'11". You did not fit through that window. I fit. You did not fit. I fit eventually. Joe, the plate." Silence. Then the keyboard clatter resumed. Faster now, sharper, the rhythm of someone who complained loudly about being asked to do things and then did them at twice the speed of anyone else alive. "I'm pulling DOT cameras on the 149 corridor," Joe said. "Give me 10 seconds. And for the record, I'm doing this under protest, and also I'm billing you in snacks. Specifically those black sesame mochi from the place on Bayard." "Done." The big box, not the small box. The big box is the apology box. The small box is the "I mildly inconvenienced you" box. This is not a mild inconvenience. This is a full-blown midnight felony snack situation. The truck turned south. Madeline followed, keeping 2 car lengths back. The rain was a gift. It blurred headlights, made tailing easier. The truck drove steadily, no urgency, no evasive maneuvers. Either they didn't know she was behind them, or they didn't care. Through the bouncing rear door, she caught another flash of the cage. Cashmere hadn't moved. He sat in the center of the crate with his spine straight and his ruined tail wrapped around his front paws. Even being kidnapped in the back of a cargo truck, he sat like he was enduring a mildly tedious state function, and the canapes were unforgivably late. "Got it," Joe said. "Partial match on a Ford Transit. White, registered to a shell company. Madeline." The keyboard stopped. "The shell traces back to a group called Hargrove Allied Holdings." Madeline's hands tightened on the wheel. Hargrove. The same Hargrove from Michael Webb's tip. The development deal. The documents that were supposed to blow the roof off. "There's more," Joe said. Her voice had dropped. No sass, no snack demands, no Tyler updates. The voice Joe used when the data turned ugly. "Hargrove Allied is flagged in 3 federal databases. Money laundering, racketeering, and 1 sealed file that I can see the edges of but can't open. And Madeline, the sealed file has a classification tag I've only ever seen on cases involving..." She stopped. "Non-human entities." "Meaning what?" "Meaning shifters. Criminal shifter network. This isn't a real estate company, Madeline. This is a pack. A bad one. The kind of bad where people stop showing up to work and nobody files a missing persons report." The truck's brake lights flared red in the rain. It was turning into an industrial lot, a warehouse district south of the expressway, all corrugated metal and loading docks and the kind of security cameras that were bolted high and pointed everywhere. "Joe," Madeline said quietly, "I found a cat in that house." "Okay? A talking cat." Silence. "Joe? I'm sorry, I think the rain is interfering with my ears, because for a second there it sounded like you said, 'a cat.' Who talks? Who told me his name, his job title, and exactly which drawer to find the bolt cutters in? He also insulted my breath mint, critiqued my window entry technique, and compared my entrance to a giraffe being posted through a letterbox. And now he's in the back of that truck, heading into a warehouse owned by a criminal shifter pack." The pause stretched long enough for Madeline to hear Joe's gaming chair creak as she leaned back. "The big box of mochi," Joe said, "and the red bean ones from the place on Mott. 2 boxes, possibly 3. This is an evolving snack situation, and I reserve the right to escalate without notice." The truck disappeared through the warehouse gate. Madeline didn't stop. She pulled past the gate, turned down the service road that ran along the north side of the warehouse complex, and killed the headlights. A loading dock sat 50 yards ahead. Roll-up door half raised, a rectangle of fluorescent light spilling onto wet concrete. 2 men stood under it, smoking. The truck's engine echoed from inside the building. "Joe, I need the building layout." "Madeline, no. There's a loading dock on the north side. What's the interior footprint?" "Madeline, no. These are criminal shifters, as in people who turn into large predatory animals for fun and profit. You are a journalist. Your most dangerous weapon is a dictaphone and a very aggressive dimple." "Joe." "Fine. Pulling permits now. Main floor is open warehouse, 12,000 square feet. Office block on the east side, 2nd floor. 2 exits besides the dock. South fire door, west personnel entrance. Happy? Please go home." Madeline eased the car into a shadow between 2 dumpsters and cut the engine. The loading dock was 40 yards away. The 2 men finished their cigarettes and went inside. The roll-up door stayed half raised. She waited 90 seconds. Then she got out, hunched against the rain, and moved along the wall. The dock was 3 feet off the ground. She pulled herself up, rolled under the door, and landed in a crouch behind a stack of wooden pallets. The warehouse floor stretched out ahead. High ceilings, metal shelving, a few forklifts parked along the far wall. The truck sat in the center of the space, rear doors now fully open. 2 men were sliding the cage off the truck bed onto a wheeled dolly. Cashmere sat inside the cage with the posture of an emperor being transported through a province he found aesthetically disappointing. The men wheeled the cage toward the office block. A door opened. They pushed the cage through and the door closed. Madeline counted the men she could see. 2 at the truck, 1 near the forklifts talking on a phone. The loading dock behind her was still clear. She moved. Pallets to shelving. Shelving to forklift. Forklift to the wall beside the office door. The concrete floor was wet and her boots were quiet. She pressed her back against the wall and listened. Voices through the door. Muffled. Male. At least 2, maybe 3. And underneath them, nothing. No sound from Cashmere. Either he was staying silent on purpose or he couldn't speak with an audience. The office door had a wire glass window. Madeline edged her face to the corner and looked. A hallway. Fluorescent lights. The cage was visible at the far end, pushed against a wall. 2 men stood near it, one leaning against a desk, one sitting in a chair that was too small for him. Both big. Both wearing the particular expression of men who were comfortable with violence and bored by the intervals between it. And walking toward the cage from an inner office, smoothing his tie, a 3rd man, taller, leaner, gray suit, no wrinkle, the kind of composure that cost more than the suit did. Madeline memorized his face, mid-40s, sharp jaw, eyes the color of tarnished silver. He moved like someone who owned the room and the building and the block and probably had opinions about the adjacent blocks, too. He crouched beside the cage and said something to Cashmere that Madeline couldn't hear through the glass. Cashmere didn't respond. He didn't look at the man. He stared straight ahead at the far wall with the focused intensity of a creature who was pretending the person in front of him did not exist on a molecular level. Madeline needed to get closer. She tried the door handle. Locked. She looked up. A ventilation grate near the ceiling, standard 12 by 12. She was 5'11". She was not fitting through a 12 by 12 grate. She had already tested the limits of her relationship with small openings tonight, and the relationship was strained. The fire exit. South side. Joe had said south fire door. She backtracked along the warehouse wall, around the shelving, past the forklifts. The south fire door was a heavy steel number with a push bar. She pressed her ear against it. Silence on the other side. She pushed. The alarm screamed. Not a subtle alarm, not a gentle beeping. A full industrial fire alarm, a sound that could wake the dead, offend the living, and cause permanent hearing damage to anyone standing within 30 feet, which currently included Madeline. "Oh, come on," she said to nobody. The warehouse erupted, shouts from the office block, boots on concrete. The two men from the truck were already running toward her. Madeline slammed back through the south door and ran. Not toward her car, wrong direction, too far. She cut left, along the exterior wall, through the rain, heading for the loading dock. If she could get under the roll-up door and across to the service road. Headlights. The truck. Someone had started the truck. It swung out of the loading dock and turned in her direction, high beams cutting through the rain like searchlights. She flattened herself against the wall. The truck rolled past, slow, hunting. The passenger window was down, and the man inside was scanning the lot with a flashlight. The beam swept toward her. 10 feet away. 5. A sound erupted from inside the warehouse. A yowl so loud, so guttural, so theatrically agonized that it stopped the flashlight mid-sweep. It sounded like someone had stepped on a bagpipe made of cats. It sounded like opera performed by a creature who had never heard opera, but had strong opinions about it. It rose, it fell, it warbled through 3 octaves, and it did not stop. The man with the flashlight jerked the beam toward the loading dock. "The hell is that? The cat's going nuts!" "Go check it," the driver said. The passenger jumped out and ran for the dock. The truck idled. The driver leaned forward, peering through the windshield at the warehouse entrance, completely ignoring the 5'11" woman pressed against the wall 6 feet behind his rear bumper. Madeline didn't breathe. She counted to 3, peeled herself off the wall, and walked. Not ran, walked, because running draws eyes and walking is invisible, along the fence line, through the gap where the chain link had rusted away from the post and into the service road. Her car was exactly where she'd left it, wedged between the dumpsters, dripping quietly in the rain like it was embarrassed to be involved. She got in. She did not start the engine. She sat in the dark with her hands shaking on the steering wheel and her heart trying to escape through her ribs. Inside the warehouse, the yowling stopped as abruptly as it had started. She could picture it. Cashmere sitting in his cage, spine straight, expression neutral, as if the sound had come from somewhere else entirely. A building full of criminal shifters staring at a cat who stared back with the serene indifference of a creature who had never made a sound in his life and found the accusation vaguely offensive. Madeline pressed her forehead against the steering wheel. Her phone buzzed. Joe. A text. All caps. Dot camera shows you inside the building, then running, then hiding. What is happening? My blood pressure has a blood pressure. Then, 3 seconds later, do not reply if you are dead. Actually, do reply if you are dead because I need closure. Then, 3 boxes. 3 boxes of mochi. Minimum. I am adding a surcharge for cardiac events. Madeline started the car. She pulled out of the service road with her headlights off, turned north, and didn't switch them on until she was 4 blocks away. In her rearview mirror, the warehouse sat in the rain, lit by its own fluorescent glow. Somewhere inside it, a cat named Cashmere was sitting in a cage, missing his fur, refusing to discuss the kibble, and, she was almost certain, deeply pleased with himself. She'd be back for him, that wasn't a question. But first, she needed bolt cutters that actually worked, a plan that didn't involve fire alarms, and 3 boxes of mochi. Her phone buzzed one more time. Joe. The red bean ones, from Mott Street. Do not substitute. I will know. Madeline turned north toward Manhattan. The dimple on her left cheek was back. Chapter 2. The mochi arrived at Joe's apartment at 1:47 a.m., carried by a woman who smelled like rain, motor oil, and regret, and who had a shower curtain fiber still clinging to the back of her collar. Jo opened the door in a black silk robe printed with tiny skulls. Her dark hair piled in a knot held together by what appeared to be 2 chopsticks and a USB cable. She looked at Madeline. She looked at the 3 boxes of mochi stacked in Madeline's arms. She looked at Madeline again. "You have that look," Jo said. "What look?" "The look you get right before you ask me to commit a felony. It's like your dimple, but angrier. Come in. Don't touch my servers." Jo's apartment was a 1-bedroom in Chinatown that had been converted, through sheer force of personality and an alarming amount of cable management, into something that resembled a NASA mission control room designed by someone who shopped exclusively at Hot Topic. 3 monitors glowed on a standing desk. A mechanical keyboard sat in the center like an altar. Above it, a poster of Ada Lovelace wearing sunglasses had been taped to the wall with electrical tape that matched Jo's nail polish. Matte black. No exceptions. Madeline set the mochi on the kitchen counter, which was the only surface in the apartment not covered in hardware. "Red bean from Mott," Madeline said. "Big box, as promised." Jo opened the first box, inspected a mochi with the focus of a jeweler examining a suspect diamond, and bit into it. She chewed. She nodded once. "Acceptable. Begin your pitch." "It's not a pitch." "It is absolutely a pitch. You brought 3 boxes. 3 boxes is, I need you to do something that might get us arrested. 2 boxes is, I need a favor. 1 box is, I feel guilty about something. 0 boxes is, I'm about to lie to you. I've calibrated this system over 6 years, Madeline. It is airtight." Madeline pulled out a kitchen chair and sat. "I need to go back to the warehouse." "No. I need to get Cashmere out." "The talking cat?" "Yes. The talking cat in a cage inside a warehouse run by criminal shifters who are flagged in 3 federal databases." "That's the one." Jo ate another mochi. She did not sit down. Standing was her power position. 5'2" in socks, and every inch of it operated at a frequency that made taller people nervous. "Madeline." Jo set the mochi box down with the careful precision of someone placing a detonator. "I love you. You are my best friend. You are the reason I have not been arrested for hacking. Because every time I'm about to do something unhinged, I think, what would Madeline do? And then I do the opposite, because what Madeline would do is climb the building. You are not going back to that warehouse. He's losing his fur, Jo. Lots of cats lose fur. It's a whole thing. There are supplements. Every time they force him to read someone's memories, another piece of his coat falls out. They've done it 11 times in 3 days. He said it takes centuries to grow back. Of course, he was exaggerating about the centuries, but he is in very poor condition, Jo." Jo's hand paused halfway to the mochi box. Her fingers curled, uncurled. The argument collapsed behind her eyes the way arguments always collapsed when animals were involved, quickly, completely, and with the structural integrity of wet cardboard. "Okay," Jo said, "but you have to do what I say. Deal. And you have to give Sam a second chance." "Deal. What?" "Come on, when was the last time you went on a date? And he didn't know you were vegan when he ordered that kangaroo steak." "Jo!" "All right, that was disgusting. How about you have to go on another date I arrange?" Madeline pressed her fingers into her temples. "Fine. And I'm driving. That's non-negotiable. Also fine." "Good." Jo snapped the mochi box shut. "For the record, I agreed because of the cat, not because of your pitch. Your pitch was terrible. It relied entirely on emotional manipulation and animal cruelty imagery, and it worked instantly, and I'm furious about it." They took Jo's car, a matte black Subaru WRX that Jo maintained with the devotion most people reserve for children or religion. The license plates were clean, the registration was current, and the aftermarket scanner bolted to the dash could pick up police frequencies, private security channels, and, Jo claimed, certain satellite transmissions that she was neither confirming nor denying she had the clearance to receive. "Left here," Madeline said from the passenger seat. "I know where the warehouse is. I pulled the permits 3 hours ago. I have a photographic memory for building layouts and grudges." Jo turned the wheel with one hand. "Also, I'm never going to forgive you for interrupting my match with Tyler. I was going to make him cry. Real tears. the kind that make a 12-year-old question his entire gaming identity. You stole that from me. Tyler will survive. Tyler will respawn is what Tyler will do, because Tyler has no quit in him, and that's why I respect and despise him in equal measure. Joe pulled off the expressway and onto the service road. The rain had eased to a drizzle. The warehouse complex materialized ahead, dark shapes against dark sky, punctuated by security lights mounted on poles. More security than before, Madeline said. 2 vehicles parked near the loading dock now instead of none. Light from the office block, someone was in there. Joe stopped the car 300 yards out, behind a concrete barrier at the edge of an adjacent lot. She killed the engine and the headlights. Right. Joe pulled a laptop from the back seat, opened it, and her fingers hit the keys with a speed that bordered on the violent. Con Ed grid map, Sector 7, industrial corridor south of the Cross Bronx. Their feed runs through. Here, she tapped the screen. Transformer station 6 blocks east. I spoof a fault, the automated system trips the breaker, the whole corridor goes dark. Everything. Streetlights, security, building power, the sad little microwave in their break room, all of it. How long until backup generators kick in? If they have a generator, and they might, this is a working warehouse. 45 seconds to auto start, another 15 for the system to cycle. Call it 60 seconds of total darkness. Joe looked at Madeline over the laptop screen. 60 seconds, not 3 minutes. Once the Jenny kicks, the cameras come back. Maybe not all of them, but enough. 60 seconds to get in, find Cashmere, and get out. 60 seconds to get in, find a cat in the dark, open a lock you haven't seen yet, and run back to this car carrying 15 pounds of fur and attitude in a building full of criminal shifters at 2 a.m. Joe closed the laptop. I just want to make sure we're both hearing how this sounds. It sounds like a solid plan, Joe. Better. Joe's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Ready? Madeline buttoned her jacket, checked her pockets. Phone, pen, nothing useful, and nothing incriminating. She looked at the warehouse. She thought about Cashmere sitting in that cage, spine straight, coat ruined, refusing to acknowledge the existence of people who were beneath him. Do it, she said. Joe typed 4 keystrokes. The world went dark. Every light in the corridor, street lamps, security spots, the fluorescent glow from the warehouse windows, died simultaneously. The darkness was instant and total, as if someone had thrown a blanket over the entire block. Go, Joe said. Madeline went. She crossed the lot at a run, staying low, her boots splashing through puddles she couldn't see. The personnel door on the west side was a dark rectangle in a dark wall. She hit it with her shoulder and it swung inward. No resistance, no alarm. The electronic lock disengaged exactly as predicted. Inside was black. Warehouse-grade black. No windows on this side, no emergency lighting, nothing. She pulled her phone from her pocket and shielded the screen with her palm, letting just enough light leak through her fingers to see the floor 3 feet ahead. Concrete, shelving to her right. The smell of diesel and cardboard, and underneath it, something animal. Musk, dense and layered, the scent of creatures who were not entirely human and didn't bother pretending. 30 seconds, Joe said in her ear. Madeline moved fast, navigating by memory and phone glow. Past the shelving, past the forklifts, toward the office block on the east side. The door to the hallway was ahead. She'd seen it from the outside. Wire glass window, the corridor where they'd wheeled Cashmere's cage. She pushed through. The hallway stretched left and right. She went left, toward where she'd last seen the cage. There. Not the same cage. This one was larger. Industrial kennel, heavy-gauge wire, the kind used for zoo transport. And the lock wasn't a padlock. It was a combination lock, a heavy-duty dial, the kind with numbers. Cashmere sat inside, exactly as she'd last seen him. Spine straight, tail wrapped around his paws, sea-green eyes reflecting her phone light like twin moons. You came back, he said. Not surprised, not grateful. The tone of someone confirming a delivery they'd already scheduled. I told you I would. Madeline crouched beside the cage. Combination lock 4 digits. Please tell me you... 7319. Madeline spun the dial. 7319. The lock clicked open with a sound so satisfying it should have come with background music. "How did you—" "The gentleman who set the combination did so while I was in the cage, facing me, at a distance of approximately 4 feet," Cashmere said. He stepped through the open cage door with the measured dignity of a head of state descending from a private aircraft. He shielded the dial with his hand. He did not shield the dial from the reflective surface of the water dish 3 inches to my left, which provided a clear and inverted view of his fingers. He then turned to his associate and said, and I quote, "Nobody's cracking that." Cashmere paused. One ear rotated toward the corridor behind them, checked, rotated back. The word nobody has never been used with less accuracy, although gentleman is also doing heavy lifting in that sentence. 50 seconds, Joe said in her ear. "We need to move," Madeline said. She reached down instinctively to pick him up. Cashmere leaned back from her hands with the precision of a monarch dodging a commoner's handshake. "I am capable of locomotion. You're capable of being slow. I can carry—" "You may not. Cashmere, we have less than a minute before the lights come back on, and this building fills up with very large, very angry shifters who— 53 seconds ago, you opened a combination lock in the dark while crouching on a concrete floor with a phone clamped between your teeth," Cashmere said. He was already moving, trotting down the hallway with a speed that contradicted his size, his paws silent on the linoleum. "I am not the bottleneck in this operation." They ran. Hallway to warehouse floor. Cashmere moved like smoke, low, fluid, soundless, and Madeline followed, abandoning the phone light in favor of speed. The darkness was thinning. Somewhere outside, a generator coughed. "Generator's fighting my fault injection," Joe said. "I've got maybe 15 more seconds. Move." The west personnel door was ahead. Madeline could feel the air changing. Cooler, wetter, the outside leaking in. She pushed through the door into the drizzle and the lot and the blessed, beautiful dark. A hand clamped around her arm. Not a hand, a grip. 5 fingers that wrapped her bicep the way a vice wraps a pipe. Total, mechanical, and completely unconcerned with her opinion about it. She was yanked sideways, off balance, her boots skidding on wet concrete, and suddenly she was facing a chest. A very large chest. Madeline's eyes traveled up, past the chest, past the shoulders, which were the approximate width of a filing cabinet, past the neck, which was the kind of neck that made other necks feel inadequate, to a face. The face was a problem, not because it was ugly, the opposite. It was the kind of face that had been assembled by someone who understood geometry and bone structure and the specific ratio of jaw to cheekbone that made reasonable women do unreasonable things. Dark hair, wet from the rain, pushed back, eyes that weren't brown or green or gray, but some shifting combination of all three, like a forest floor after a storm. A nose that had been broken at least once and had come back more interesting for it. He was looking at her the way a wolf looks at something that just walked into its territory. Not with anger, not with hunger, but with a calm, absolute attention that said, "I see every part of you, and I have already decided what you are." Something about his face, something familiar, like a word on the tip of her tongue, a song she'd heard through a wall. She hadn't met this man, she was certain. She would have remembered a man who made the rain look like a special effect. But something in the architecture of him, the angle of the jaw, the set of the brow, pulled at a thread in her memory she couldn't place. The generator roared to life. Security lights flooded the lot. The man hadn't spoken. He held Madeline's arm with one hand and stood in the rain as if it were an inconvenience arranged specifically for lesser people. His nostrils flared once, testing the air, reading her the way she read a crime scene. Every molecule catalogued and filed. Then his gaze dropped to the ground beside her, where Cashmere had been, where Cashmere was not. Madeline looked down. Wet concrete, rain, her own boots, no cat, no 15 pounds of fur and attitude, no sea-green eyes, nothing. He was gone, not hiding behind her legs, not crouched against the wall, not visible anywhere in the lot. Cashmere had vanished as if he'd been made of the rain itself, and had simply rejoined it. "The cat," the man said. His voice was low, not quiet, low, the kind of voice that didn't need volume because it operated on a frequency that went straight through walls and excuses and the part of your brain that was supposed to be making rational decisions. Every word landed like a stone dropped into still water. Madeline looked up at him. "What cat?" Something shifted behind his eyes. Not anger, interest, the worst possible response to a lie. Anger meant she'd offended him. Interest meant she'd entertained him. Entertained was worse. Entertained meant he planned to keep watching. A sound split the dark. Boots on wet concrete, fast, light, coming from the direction of the car park. The man's head turned a fraction. His nostrils flared again. Joe came around the corner of the building at a dead sprint, 5'2", matte black nails, laptop bag bouncing against her hip, and in her right hand, raised above her head like a medieval flail, a collapsible titanium laptop stand that she had detached from its base and was now swinging with the focused fury of a woman who had seen her best friend grabbed by a stranger and had made a series of decisions in rapid succession, none of which involved caution. She hit the alpha in the kidney. The laptop stand connected with a sound like an aluminium bat striking a particularly indifferent oak tree. The man didn't stagger. He didn't flinch. His body absorbed the impact the way a mountain absorbs rain, completely, dispassionately, and with no visible effect on the landscape. He turned his head and looked down at Joe. Joe looked up at him. Her arm was still raised. The laptop stand was slightly bent. The moment stretched. Rain fell. Security lights hummed. Somewhere inside the warehouse, men were shouting. "Hi," Joe said. She looked at the place where the laptop stand had connected with his side. Not a mark, not a wrinkle in his shirt. The man released Madeline's arm. Both his hands moved. One collected Joe's laptop stand, which he removed from her grip with the effortless precision of a parent confiscating a crayon, and the other caught Joe's shoulder as she tried to bolt. He held them the way someone holds 2 bags of groceries, one in each hand, balanced, unhurried, mildly inconvenienced by the errand. "We just wanted the cat," Madeline said. "That's it. We're not law enforcement, we're not competition. We have zero interest in your supply chain or your operations or whatever is in those crates. Honestly, if you told me right now, I'd forget it immediately. I have a very selective memory." "You came here for the cat," he said, as if she hadn't spoken. "The cat is gone. He'll come back for you." Joe twisted in his grip. "That's a bold assumption about a cat. Cats don't come back for anyone. Cats come back for food. If you want to trap a cat, you put out a tin of tuna and wait. Everyone knows this. It's like day 1 of cat school. I'll make sure I do that. Thanks for the tip." He moved them both toward the loading dock. Not dragging, not shoving, just walking. And they walked with him because the alternative was being carried. And being carried by a man this size would involve a degree of indignity that neither of them was prepared to experience. Through the loading dock, across the warehouse floor, past the forklifts and the shelving, and the men who watched them pass with the flat, unreadable expressions of people who'd seen this before and expected to see it again. Into the office block, down the hallway, past Cashmere's empty cage, door hanging open, combination lock on the floor, water dish still reflecting the fluorescent light. A door at the end of the hall. He opened it with one hand. A windowless room, 10 by 12, bare walls, a metal table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs. The kind of room designed for conversations that nobody enjoyed. He put them inside the way you put leftovers in the fridge, efficiently, without ceremony, with the clear intention of coming back for them later. Madeline turned at the threshold. "You can't just lock us in here." He turned and looked her in the eye. "I just did." He turned and left the room. Chapter 3. The room had 2 chairs, 1 table, no windows, and the combined escape potential of a sealed envelope. Madeline sat in one chair. Joe sat in the other. Their phones sat somewhere else entirely, confiscated by a man whose neck circumference exceeded Joe's waist measurement and who had pocketed them with the casual efficiency of a bouncer collecting fake IDs. "They took my phone," Joe said, staring at the ceiling. "They took my laptop. They took my stand. They took my earpiece. I have been technologically stripped. I am naked, Madeline. Digitally naked. This is what the Dark Ages felt like. This is how monks lived. I refuse." "We need to focus," Madeline said. I am focused. I am focused on the void where my devices used to be. It's a spiritual crisis. Jo closed her eyes, pressed her palms flat on the metal table, and straightened her spine. She inhaled through her nose, long, deliberate, theatrical. I'm sending a signal, a vibrational frequency. An energetic SOS to whatever cosmic infrastructure handles situations like this. Jo, the universe does not have a help desk. The universe has something. I refuse to believe that the same cosmic system that invented coffee and mechanical keyboards is going to let me die in a room with fluorescent lighting and no Wi-Fi. Jo pressed her palms harder against the table. I'm transmitting. Give me a minute. You're transmitting. Shh. You'll interfere with the signal. Madeline leaned back and looked at the ceiling. Water stain in the northeast corner. A dead fly in the light fixture. The fluorescent tube buzzed with the steady, mindless commitment of something too stupid to know it should stop. She pressed 2 fingers to her left temple. The shimmer hit. Not pain exactly, more like heat rising off summer asphalt at the edge of her vision. The same warning that came before every blackout. She pressed harder, breathed through it. The shimmer receded. Not now. Absolutely not now. I'm getting something, Jo said, eyes still closed. You're not getting anything. I'm getting a vibration, a resonance. That's the generator. It's vibrating through the floor. Don't ruin this for me. I have nothing else. A sound came from the other side of the door. Not footsteps, not voices. A soft, rhythmic tap, tap, tap against the base of the steel, precise and deliberate. The knock of someone who found knocking beneath them but was willing to lower their standards for operational purposes. Madeline stood. See? Jo opened one eye. The universe provides. That's not the universe. The universe works through intermediaries. I don't judge the delivery method. Madeline pressed her ear to the door. The tapping stopped. A pause. 2 seconds. Exactly. And then a voice, muffled by steel but unmistakable in its architecture. The door, Cashmere said from the other side, is locked with a deadbolt that engages from the exterior. The key is a standard 6-pin schlag, currently hanging from a hook on the wall approximately 14 inches to the left of the doorframe and 7 feet off the ground, which is an inconvenient height for most humans and an impossible height for most cats. A pause. I am not most cats. A metallic scraping, something heavy hitting the floor on the other side, then a small, bright jingle as an object slid under the 2-inch gap between the door and the concrete. A key. It skittered across the floor and came to rest against Madeline's boot. Jo opened both eyes. She looked at the key. She looked at Madeline. She looked at the ceiling. Thank you, universe, she said. Excellent intermediary, 5 stars. Madeline picked up the key and turned it over in her fingers. Cashmere. Yes. The deadbolt engages from the exterior. I believe I mentioned that, which means this key works from the outside. Silence. The observation is correct, Cashmere said. Jo dropped her face into her hands. The universe sent us a cat who doesn't understand doors. I understand doors thoroughly, Cashmere said, and for the first time his voice carried a hairline fracture of something that was not quite irritation and not quite embarrassment, but occupied the precise territory between them. I understand their hinges, their materials, their locking mechanisms, and their historical evolution from animal hide flaps to the modern steel abomination currently separating us. What I do not have is thumbs. The lack of opposable digits is a recurring limitation that I have raised with the relevant authorities on multiple occasions across several centuries, and it has yet to be addressed. Madeline crouched and slid the key back under the door. Can you turn it in the lock from your side? The key weighs 4 ounces. The lock requires approximately 3 foot-pounds of torque. I weigh 15 pounds, and the coefficient of friction between my paws and a polished Schlage key face is, conservatively, inadequate. A pause. No. Okay. Can you... Footsteps. Down the corridor. Heavy, unhurried, getting closer. The flat, bored cadence of a guard making rounds. Someone who'd done this shift 100 times and expected nothing from it. Someone's coming, Jo whispered, on her feet now. I hear him, Cashmere said through the door. He is approximately 40 feet away, moving at a pace that suggests neither urgency nor intelligence. His left boot has a squeak. He had garlic for dinner. I can work with this. Cashmere. Madeline kept her voice below the hum of the fluorescent tube. The yowl. The one you did in Mott Haven. Can you do it again? Dead silence. When he spoke, the word emerged like he'd bitten into something that had personally offended his entire lineage. The yowl. You are referring to the vocalization I deployed as a tactical diversion to save your life, which you are now characterizing as a yowl, as though I were a common domestic shorthair with a hairball and no self-respect. It was effective. It was mortifying. It was the single most undignified act I have committed since the Council of Trent, and I do not discuss the Council of Trent. There were political factors. I need you to do it again, on my signal. A shorter silence. She heard him exhale, a small, controlled sound, the careful breath of a creature assembling the last of his dignity into a neat pile, setting it aside, and walking away from it. If either of you, Cashmere said, ever describes what you are about to hear as a yowl, I will deny this night occurred and I will be believed, because I am a cat, and cats do not acknowledge events that diminish them. This is not a negotiation. This is a boundary. Noted, Madeline said. Firmly noted. Firmly noted, Cashmere. What's the plan? Joe whispered. I make noise. Guard opens the door. Cashmere pulls him away. You introduce yourself. Joe cracked her knuckles. I like this plan. They waited. Footsteps. Down the corridor. Heavy, unhurried, getting closer. Madeline grabbed the metal chair, lifted it, and slammed it into the table. The crash was enormous, steel on steel, a sound that belonged in a scrapyard, not a holding room. It bounced off the concrete walls and punched through the door like a fist. The footsteps stopped, then quickened. Keys jingled on the other side. The deadbolt scraped. The door swung inward. The guard filled the frame, 6'2", broad, the build of someone hired for his shoulders and not his situational awareness. He peered into the room, one hand on the door, scanning for whatever had made the noise. He saw Madeline standing by the table, the chair in her hands. He did not see Joe pressed flat against the wall behind the door. He opened his mouth to speak. Cashmere let it rip. The sound came from behind the guard, down the corridor. A yowl so loud, so guttural, so theatrically agonized that it stopped every thought the man was having and replaced it with a single primal question. What the hell is that? It started in a register no 15-pound animal should have been able to access and descended through 3 octaves of pure operatic anguish. It bounced off the corridor walls. It filled the hallway the way water fills a sinking ship. Completely, inevitably, with a commitment to total saturation. The guard spun. His squeaky left boot pivoted on the linoleum, his back turned to the door. His attention, every ounce of it such as it was, locked onto the corridor behind him. Joe moved like smoke. 5'2" in her socks. They'd taken her boots, too, and she was adding that to a list maintained with the emotional precision of a Swiss bank. She closed the distance in 4 steps, planted her back foot, and drove the heel of her palm into the soft spot behind his left ear. The rotation started at her hip. It ended at his brainstem. The guard dropped. Not slowly, not dramatically, straight down, the way a building drops in a controlled demolition. Structural integrity revoked without notice. Joe shook out her hand, examined her knuckles. I should have told him I had a black belt, she said. Cashmere sat at the end of the corridor, spine straight, tail wrapped around his paws, regarding the unconscious guard with the expression of a theater critic observing a clumsy set change. Adequate, he said. Adequate? Joe stared at him. I just knocked out a man who outweighs me by 150 pounds with a single strike. The technique was competent. The wind-up was theatrical. You telegraphed the rotation by approximately 0.2 of a second, which against a trained opponent would have been fatal. Cashmere stood and began moving toward the warehouse floor. Against this gentleman, it was sufficient. He is not trained. He is barely sentient. I've seen more tactical awareness from pigeons. I'm going to pretend I didn't hear the pigeon comparison, Joe said, falling into step behind him. You heard it, you'll remember it. It will bother you intermittently for years. I'm comfortable with that. They moved through the warehouse, Cashmere low and fluid, Madeline on his heels, Joe padding behind them in her socks. The loading dock was ahead. Through the half-raised roll-up door, the lot stretched out under the security lights. 2 vehicles, Joe's WRX and a black SUV. My car, Joe breathed. Keys? In my laptop bag, which they confiscated along with my dignity and my faith in property rights. Madeline scanned the SUV, driver's door lock pin-up, visible even from 30 feet. Criminal shifters didn't worry about car theft. An understandable attitude when you could bench press the vehicle and run down the thief at 40 miles an hour. She sprinted for it. The door opened. Keys in the center console. Of course they were. People who could kill you with their bare hands didn't bother hiding their keys. Madeline, that's their car, Joe said, arriving at the passenger door. They took yours. This is a trade. Joe opened the passenger door, stopped, closed it, opened it again. Okay, first of all, I was going to say that. Second of all, my WRX is worth significantly more than this SUV, so technically they're coming out ahead. They should send us a thank you card. She climbed in. Third of all, I'm choosing to view this as reparations for emotional damages, confiscated hardware, and the theft of my boots, which were vintage Doc Martens and are now in the custody of a man who smells like wet dog and has the fashion sense of a parking garage. Cashmere jumped onto the back seat, circled once, and settled in the center with his paws tucked beneath him. The posture of a creature who had always traveled by chauffeured SUV, and tonight was no different. Madeline turned the key. The engine caught on the first try. Go, Cashmere said. Quickly. She reversed out of the lot and hit the service road with the headlights off. The rain had come back, hammering the windshield in sheets. Madeline kept both hands on the wheel and her eyes on the mirrors. No headlights behind them, no shapes emerging from the dock. 2 blocks out, she exhaled for the first time in what felt like an hour. Then the thud hit the roof. Not rain, not debris. Something landed on the SUV from above, landed and held because the vehicle shuddered sideways half a foot and kept shuddering, metal groaning under concentrated weight. I didn't hit anyone, Joe said before Madeline could ask. The window beside Madeline's head exploded inward. Not glass spray. The entire frame buckled and a hand came through it. Not grabbing, clamping. Fingers like cable locked around her upper arm, and the world tilted hard as she was yanked sideways through the collapsed window frame with a force that had nothing human in it. Her feet left the car. Her spine hit the wet asphalt 2 seconds later. The Alpha stood over her. He'd come off the roof. She understood that now, the trajectory of it, the sheer physics, and landed in a half-crouch on the road beside the SUV. Rain plastered his shirt to his chest. His eyes had shifted from the boardroom calculation she'd clocked earlier to something older and less patient. He looked at Madeline on the ground with the mild curiosity of a man who'd retrieved a dropped pen. I'll take the cat, he said. Madeline sat up. Her elbow screamed where it had caught the road. She pressed her palm flat against the asphalt and got her feet under her, measured, deliberate, refusing to scramble, and stood. No, she said. The Alpha tilted his head. The calculation was back, running fast beneath the surface. He looked at the SUV. Through the shattered window, Cashmere's white form sat on the back seat, watching them both with the patient attention of a surgeon observing a procedure he'd already mentally completed. Cashmere. The Alpha's voice shifted register, lower, directed. I have no quarrel with you. The information you retrieved, give it to me. Everyone walks away. Cashmere said nothing. His tail moved once, the slow pendulum sweep of a creature deciding whether a situation warranted his full attention. Joe's door opened. The Alpha turned just far enough to register her, and didn't bother to turn back. One hand came up in a gesture that was almost gentle, the way you'd gesture at a child to stay seated. Don't, he said. Joe's eyes went to Madeline. Madeline gave the smallest shake of her head. Not yet. Give me the info, Cat, and everyone lives. Cashmere stepped out of the SUV. No drama. No announcement. He placed his front paws on the doorsill, dropped to the wet road, and walked toward the Alpha with the unhurried authority of a diplomat approaching a podium. You are overconfident, Cashmere said. The alpha looked down at him. That's what it takes to be an alpha. It's unfortunate. Cashmere sat. The rain flattened his fur along his spine, but his posture didn't alter by a degree. You wish to know whether I retrieved information from the late Mr. Dreven's memory regarding the location of the stones. The answer is yes. I retrieved it during the 11 readings your people conducted. He paused. The pause was surgical. I have absolutely no intention of telling you. The alpha's jaw shifted. You're a cat. In a rainstorm, on a service road at 3 a.m. I'm going to need you to recalibrate your understanding of leverage. Recalibrated, Cashmere said pleasantly. New calculation follows. He flicked Rain from one ear with a paw. Your primary operating account is held at Cayman National, Branch 7. Account number 88841-7723-0061. Routing prefix CNCBKY. The alpha's expression didn't change, but something behind it did. A stillness that was its own kind of motion. Your secondary account, Cashmere continued, the one your pack's leadership doesn't know about, the one you use to cover the liquidity shortfall that would, if discovered, end your tenure and possibly your life, is at Zurich Cantonal Bank. He let rain drip down his whiskers. I have all of your login credentials, including the security questions. The answer to what is your greatest fear is, I must say, devastating. The alpha was very still. Your personal passcode, Cashmere said, is a 6-digit alphanumeric that begins with your mother's maiden name and ends with the year you lost your first fight. Another pause. You were 14. The other boy was smaller. It was embarrassing. You think about it more than you should. Somewhere below the alpha's surface, tectonic plates shifted. 18 minutes ago, Cashmere said, I transmitted your complete financial profile to a network of associates. Every account, every routing number, every password, including the answer to your greatest fear, which I included not because it's relevant, but because it's funny. He looked up at the alpha with the mild, absolute patience of a creature who had outlasted empires. If anything happens to me, or to these two women, anything at all, the transfer initiates automatically. Every dollar you control moves to accounts you cannot trace, cannot access, and cannot recover. Madeline watched the equation resolve behind the alpha's eyes, the rapid, furious mathematics of a man who was very good at numbers and had just encountered a variable that didn't bend. Go, the alpha said. Cashmere stood and turned for the SUV. They were 10 feet from the car when the air changed. Madeline felt it first, a shift in pressure, the atmospheric signature of something large committing to a decision it had just reversed. She turned. The alpha was moving, 6 feet away and closing, and the calculation in his eyes had collapsed into something darker, something that lived below the language centers of the brain. His hands were open. The deal was off. He was going for Cashmere. Madeline stepped directly into his path, both hands flat on his chest. She shoved. It was roughly equivalent to shoving a parked car. He barely rocked. But the half-second she bought was enough. Cashmere sat down on the wet asphalt, opened his mouth, and produced a sound that did not belong to this century. It wasn't the yowl. The yowl had been performance, theatrical, operatic, deliberately ridiculous. This was something else, a frequency, a vibration that started below human hearing and climbed through it like a blade through silk, not loud, not theatrical, but targeted. It hit the air and the air rippled. The rain falling between Cashmere and the alpha shuddered sideways, as if the drops themselves were trying to relocate. The alpha's stride broke. His right foot came down wrong, his left knee buckled. Both hands went to his temples, pressing hard, the involuntary gesture of a man whose skull had just become too small for its contents. He dropped. Not gracefully, not slowly. Straight down, and when he hit the asphalt, the impact cracked the concrete. He lay on his back in the rain, chest rising and falling, alive and unconscious. His face, stripped of all the authority and calculation, looked younger, almost peaceful. Cashmere closed his mouth. The frequency stopped. The rain fell normally. He looked at the unconscious alpha the way a librarian looks at a book returned with pages missing, with disappointment, not surprise. The gentleman, Cashmere said, should not have changed his mind. Joe stood frozen by the passenger door. "Cashmere, you just dropped a werewolf crime boss with a meow." It was not a meow. It was a precisely modulated acoustic intervention targeting the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system simultaneously. Calling it a meow is like calling a surgical laser a flashlight. The insult is to the engineering. "How long will he be out?" Madeline asked, already moving toward the driver's door. Her elbow throbbed. Her knee had caught the asphalt when she'd shoved the Alpha, and it was going to bruise spectacularly by morning. She cataloged these facts the way she cataloged everything, cleanly, without fuss, saving the emotional processing for a time and location that wasn't a service road in the Bronx at 3 a.m. 7 to 12 minutes, Cashmere said. "His metabolism is accelerated. His neurological recovery will be proportionally fast." He jumped into the SUV. "I suggest we not be here for that." Madeline got in, started the engine, reversed carefully around the unconscious body of the Alpha, because running over an unconscious werewolf crime boss felt like it would create more problems than it solved, and drove north. Nobody spoke for 4 blocks. "A question," Cashmere said from the back seat, "purely hypothetical." "Go ahead," Madeline said. "The Alpha's financial information is still live in my network. The dead man's switch is genuine. It was not a bluff. If I were to initiate the transfer now, not as aggression, but as a processing fee for the 11 readings he extracted without my consent, the damage to my coat, the 3 days in a cage, and the discovery that his water dish had not been changed once during that period, which I consider a war crime against hydration." "No," Madeline said. "Absolutely not," Joe said. "We made a deal," Madeline said. "He let us go. He keeps his money. We don't steal, even from people who deserve it. Even from people who were about to kill us 30 seconds ago," Joe added. Cashmere regarded them both in the rearview mirror. Those sea-green eyes held something she hadn't seen there before. Not the imperial detachment, not the weary superiority. Something older. Something that looked, if she was reading it correctly, like respect. "I know," he said quietly. "I wasn't going to transfer it. I wanted to see what you'd say." Joe twisted in her seat. "Was that a test? Without consent?" "I assess information. I assess the reliability of sources." He tucked his front paws beneath him. "And I assess the character of the people I choose to remain in proximity to." "Cognitive Archivist," Madeline said. Her eyes stayed on the road, but her voice had dropped into the register Joe called her dimple-disappearing voice, the one that meant a thread had snagged and she was pulling it. "That's not a thing, Cashmere. It is a very specific thing. You made it up." "I did not make it up, Madeline." His tail tapped the seat once. "You didn't black out for no reason. There is a great deal of information your body is carrying that your brain hasn't been cleared to access yet." Madeline pulled the car over, not to the curb, into the middle of the service road, engine running, rain hammering the roof. She turned in her seat and looked at him directly. "What did you just say?" Cashmere's whiskers twitched. "I could yowl right now, change the subject entirely. You had blackouts?" Joe's voice climbed an octave. "And I know nothing about that? I'm going to tell Mom." "We'll explain later, Joe." Madeline didn't break eye contact with the cat. "Now, Cat." She held his gaze. "An informant I'd approached months ago, a man who refused to give me anything, suddenly calls the tip line. 'Can't wait, has to be tonight.' I show up and he's gone. But you're there, in a cage, in exactly the kind of condition that guarantees someone like me can't walk away." Cashmere's ears rotated a quarter-inch forward. The rest of him didn't move. "I presented the conditions," he said. "But you're responsible for your own actions." "You can drop an Alpha with a meow," Madeline said. "Sound waves, not meow. That's insulting." "Whatever. You can read bank accounts out of a man's brain. You can manipulate criminal shifters who outweigh you by 250 pounds. She leaned closer. "You are not a damsel in distress." "Certainly not a damsel," Cashmere said, "and I have never been in distress. Distress implies a loss of composure. I have been inconvenienced." "Then explain the cage." The cage was real. The helplessness wasn't. Cashmere held her gaze for 3 seconds. 4, 5. Then his fur rippled. Not fell, not shed. rippled, a wave that started at the crown of his head and rolled down his spine like a tide coming in. Everywhere it passed, the ruined coat transformed, bare patches filled. The thin, tragic ruff thickened into a lion's mane of white silk. The bald spot above his left ear vanished under a cascade of new growth so dense it caught the dashboard light and held it. Even the sad tuft on his flank, the one she'd watched drift to the cage floor in Mott Haven, bloomed into a plume of fur so impossibly soft it looked like a cloud had taken physical form and settled on a cat. He sat in the back seat of a stolen SUV on the Cross Bronx Expressway, and he was magnificent. 15 pounds of Norwegian Forest Cat in full winter coat, every strand aligned and luminous, his ruff a cascade of white silk, his tail a banner of pure, extravagant volume. He looked like a creature that belonged on a throne in a Norse saga, surrounded by lesser beings who existed primarily to appreciate him. "Oh," Joe said. "Oh, you absolute drama queen." "The readings did extract a cost," Cashmere said. "The recovery, however, is not a matter of centuries. That was a theatrical embellishment designed to establish sympathy and encourage protective behavior." He groomed one immaculate paw. "It worked precisely as intended." "You lied to us," Madeline said. "I like you both," he said. "And you've both passed." "Passed what?" Joe demanded. "Character assessment, administered under field conditions without the candidate's knowledge or consent, which is the only way to get an honest result." He jumped to the center console and sat on it like a podium built for him. "My authority, which I will name once and will not repeat, so listen carefully, is the Fairy Godmother's Soulmate Registry. I am an operative of the Matching Division." Dead silence in the car. "I'm sorry," Joe said. "Fairy Godmother? I said I would name it once." "You work for a Fairy Godmother, Matching Division, like a supernatural Tinder?" "That comparison is so reductive it has caused me physical pain. I want you to know that a small piece of my soul has died, and I am holding you personally responsible." Cashmere's tail lashed once. "The registry has been in operation for longer than your species has had written language. I identify candidates with specific character profiles and ensure they are positioned correctly for what comes next." "What comes next?" Madeline repeated flatly. "Your cases were flagged," Cashmere said. "Both of you. Complicated personalities, unconventional backgrounds, the kind of files that accumulate dust." "Files," Joe said. "In what we refer to, informally, as the cold cases department." "We're cold cases?" Madeline's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. "Dating cold cases?" "The romantic component is one variable among many. I assess compatibility across 47 dimensions, of which physical attraction is number 31, wedged between conflict resolution under duress and shared tolerance for ambient noise." He examined a claw. "Not unimportant. Also not the point." "What is the point?" Joe asked. "The point is that your matches exist, and before your cases were filed permanently into the cold storage archive, which is the bureaucratic equivalent of dying alone with 17 cats, and I say that with professional authority, I volunteered to intervene." "Volunteered," Madeline said. "Aggressively volunteered. There was paperwork. It was considerable." "And you need us to pull our weight," Madeline said. "You're catching on. I don't carry passengers." Cashmere looked between them. "It starts with the pharmaceutical article. You'll find out shortly. And when you do, you will take the assignment. Not because I told you to. Because you're Madeline Roux, and when a story finds you, you don't walk away from it." He jumped from the console to the back seat, circled once, settled. "One more thing," he said. "About your match." "No," Madeline said. "One detail." "Absolutely not." "What about mine?" Joe leaned forward so fast her seatbelt locked. "What about my match?" "One detail," Cashmere said. "For Madeline, because she's driving and I prefer to arrive alive." "How is that fair?" "Life is not fair. I am a cat. Neither of these facts is new information." Cashmere looked at Madeline. The sea-green eyes went still, not playful, not performing. For half a second, the mask dropped, and she saw something underneath that was ancient and serious and strangely kind. "Dark hair," he said. "The kind of jawline that makes rational women reconsider every decision they've ever made." He paused. Let it land. And an accent that sounds like old money wrapped in rain. The car went very quiet. British? Joe whispered. He's British? I said one detail. That was 3. I'm over budget. Cashmere tucked his nose under his tail. Remember, pharmaceutical article. Pull your weight. And then he was gone. Not jumped out. Not slipped away. Gone. The way a shadow disappears when the light shifts. 1 second, 15 pounds of magnificent Norwegian Forest Cat occupied the back seat. The next, the leather was empty, still warm, with a single strand of white fur drifting toward the floor. The car went very quiet. Joe stared at the empty seat. She looked at Madeline. She looked at the seat again. Have we just been manipulated by a cat? Joe asked. Madeline's hands rested on the steering wheel. Rain tapped against the windshield. The heater hummed. Manhattan glowed ahead of them, amber and silver through the wet glass. He talks, Madeline said slowly. Which is the only thing out of the ordinary. But the soulmate thing, he made that up. You don't know that, Madeline. I don't do pharmaceuticals. I do corporate fraud. You know that, Joe. Journalism moves fast. You could be assigned to a new area. Not at the Trumpet. We work with expertise, and that beat is Peter's. Madeline's phone buzzed. She looked down. Her phone, the one that had been confiscated by a man with a neck like a fire hydrant, sat in the cup holder. She hadn't seen anyone put it there. She hadn't heard it arrive. It sat on top of Joe's phone, Joe's laptop, and Joe's earpiece, stacked with the meticulous precision of a creature who disapproved of clutter. The screen flashed Paul Boss. Joe raised an eyebrow. Your editor-in-chief tends to call at 3 in the morning? Madeline shook her head. She picked up. Paul's voice was rough, the kind of rough that meant he'd been woken up and hadn't had time to smooth the edges. Sorry to call at this hour, Madeline. There's been an accident. Peter Hannigan, he's in the ICU, collapsed at his desk. He has a major article due to release at 6 a.m., and I need someone who can handle the material. Madeline's eyes went to the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty. The strand of white fur caught the streetlight and glowed. I've never done a pharmaceutical case, Paul. Not solo, but you've worked with Peter before. You know the territory well enough. This is an emergency, Madeline. You're the only one who can handle something at this level on no notice. She gripped the steering wheel. The rain drummed. Joe watched her with the expression of someone who had just watched a cat predict the future and was recalculating her entire worldview in real time. All right, Madeline said. I'll do it. Thank you, Madeline. You're a lifesaver. She wants a raise, Joe said. But Paul had already hung up. Joe settled back in her seat and crossed her arms. Okay, no raise, but you probably won't need one. Your mate, that look, that accent, that's going to come with the kind of money that buys half of New York. You're definitely being manipulated by the cat, Joe. The cat is going to come back. Joe held up a finger. And the cat is going to help you find your soulmate. What about you? Excellent question. Then the cat works on my match. Joe's eyes lit up. And I will build him a supernatural Tinder. Madeline shook her head and turned back to the road. The rain drummed the windshield. Manhattan glowed ahead. The odd thing was, the soulmate with the irresistible jawline and enough money to buy burros wasn't what she wanted right now. What she wanted, what she kept scanning for, in the mirrors, through the rain, along every curb, was the shadow of a white cat standing somewhere on the side of the road, waiting to be picked up.
And that's the cat that plays fate. If you're sitting with it for a moment, good. That means it landed. Cashmere gave Madeline 3 things before he disappeared. Dark hair, a jawline that makes rational women question their decisions, and an accent that sounds like old money wrapped in rain. He also told her to take the pharmaceutical assignment, that it matters, that she'll understand why when she gets there. She will. That's a promise. This story connects to Mirror and Realms, the most loved series in the Multiverse collection by D.N. Leo. And if you've loved these sidekicks, if Cashmere got under your skin the way he tends to do, wait until you see what happens when the romance kicks in. The 2027 edition of Mirror and Realms is something special. The heart, the humor, the chaos, all of it, on a completely different scale. And you don't have to wait until 2027 to get in. The introduction starts in the next few weeks. If you want to be among the very first, before the rest of the world catches up, the link is below. First, readers always get the best seats. In the meantime, this story and many others are waiting for you at happynovels.com. The silver tier is free. Come find your harbor there. If the cat that plays fate made your day even slightly better, hit like. Someone else out there needs it too. This has been Mabel. Thank you for spending your time with us. See you next week.